it's going. All right, we're good. Yeah, home internets are always whatever. All right, man. Tell us about your life dreams.
Phil, am I going to start this one talking about the article? All right, cool. So Phil and I are going to talk about this article on Wait But Why called How to Pick a Career That Actually Fits You. And let me try to summarize, Phil, and you could interject if you think I'm off. But as far as I know, Tim Urban's model about how to pick a career, there are two things to consider. One, what do you want? And he brings this up because I think if you don't take the time to think about what you actually want, you could have you can be more confident about what you want than, like there might be some room there to really sit down with yourself and try to be honest. And that's something that he argues a lot of people don't do. And then, so once you figure out what you want, then you got to look at the real world and ask yourself, okay, like, what are the realistic job opportunities available given your skill set? And, from there, ideally, there'd be something in the intersection of what you want and what's available in the real world. And I think his point of view is that a lot of people, they don't really think about what they want, and then they just kind of pick some default path. And then if you think about careers, the mental model that a lot of people have is that of, like, every career is a tunnel, right? If you're a doctor, you're a doctor for life, or if you're a pharmacist, you're a pharmacist for life, or a lawyer. And his view is that in the future, it's becoming more and more common to hop around from job to job. And so you want to be more open-minded in terms of your career choices. And so I have a lot of thoughts, but you want to...
Let me attempt to unmute here. I think my microphone was causing issues. Can you hear me through the default mic?
Yeah.
Yeah, so my internet's slow here, and also I think is it clicking with this mic, like the default?
It's okay right now.
Yeah, all right. It's weird, because this mic usually is fine, but I plugged in a webcam also, so maybe the webcam plus mic just, like, destroyed the laptop's USB.
Okay, this is better, maybe.
This is a little better. We'll try to do mic and no webcam in a bit and see what the heck happens. Actually, let me try to do mic and no webcam. Why don't you try to summarize more why I try to do mic and no webcam?
So, there are a lot of points I want to talk about. One is that I don't know, my point of view is that conventional wisdom isn't as bad as the author makes it out to be. Like, I feel like for most people, you get educated and then you pick a job and you stick with that job. I think that's a pretty decent default decision. He seems to argue that, a lot of people are stuck with jobs that they don't like. But to me, the alternative, to go off on your own and, for example, try to start a company, there are a lot of issues that arise when you try to do an independent path. So I'm not completely convinced that, this decision about what job to pick, that a lot of people screw it up. I think a lot of people, there are compromises they make in life, but overall, I think, the majority of people would be reasonably okay with their life decisions. Phil, do you have any thoughts?
I'm going to jump in with Mike. So this is my mic, but no webcam. How's this?
Pretty good.
Okay, all right, let's go for it. Yeah. So I think to the article, I'll assume that people have read it, which is a lot of homework. So because I'm not going to spend all our time summarizing part of the article. It is pretty long, but I think this guy is known for these long reads, right? These kinds of longer, more well thought out blog posts and more reflective ones. To it, and it's like, I feel like we might not be the target audience at the moment. I feel like the target audience for this blog post is someone who is trying to, maybe graduating from college and trying to decide on a career path, about whether to switch career paths. So I think, for most people who are reasonably honest, relevant, but it's interesting to think about your own path and saying, like, is this something that I'm doing out of inertia, or is it something that I really, really want? And it's hard to, he doesn't often easy answers, but it's hard to tease that apart. So I feel like where we're like, oh, I really want to decide something right now, then that seems like maybe a reasonable framework to go through the exercise and list out all the options and your desires and such. So, we're probably not organized right now, but it's interesting to reflect on nonetheless.
I mean, I think, well, in my case, I decided to try to start a company, and so it's a path that isn't traditional, right? And the reason why I'm a little hesitant to like fully embrace the thesis or what I perceive to be the thesis of the article is that, like, I feel like starting a company for most people is like not a good decision. In terms of there's an opportunity cost, and you need a certain level of success before you even learn anything. I think oftentimes you can fail to such a degree that it doesn't really, even if you were to start again, like maybe you would avoid those mistakes, but it would be a marginal benefit to fail a company, given a lot of common failure modes. And I think, yeah, I guess that's, I'm thinking about my family, and most of them, they kind of just had one career for the majority of their working life. And it seemed to work reasonably well. I don't know. But yeah, Phil, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, one, kind of thought here is that the world is changing with technology and automation and all that stuff. So like, the prototypical mid 20th century, company career worker who works for a company for 40 years and gets a nice pension and like, is well compensated and everything, that might not be as stable anymore, right? That, I don't know to what extent that's reality versus, more press coverage of these sorts of things. But like, if that is to be believed, then, jobs might not be as stable, the quote unquote stable jobs might not be as stable as they used to be because, maybe the world is more competitive now, or there's less prosperity, or there's just more competition or automation or whatever. So I think there is something to that fact that, maybe in our parents' or grandparents' generation, it's like, oh, just go to college, get a job at General Electric, or get a job at Kodak. That company will never die. It'll like be taken care of for life, and that was fine for most of the 20th century. But like, if you follow that advice now, go get a job at Yahoo. It'll never die, kind of thing. So that's not to say that like if one company dies, you're totally screwed. But like the extreme of that mindset is, I'm going to be an IBM employee for life, or I'm a General Electric employee or a Kodak employee for life, and my tunnel is this company, and we work our way up and we get this nice retirement benefits and pension and stuff. So I think that is perhaps less stable nowadays, but still, that I don't think I agree. It's not that everyone should go and start their own company, because I don't think that's the rational decision either for most people.
Yeah, I guess with the mental model of the tunnels, I guess one question is like, what exactly are the tunnels? Because if the tunnel is one company, I agree that you're putting yourself too much at risk of, the company getting disrupted and then you're laid off and out of a job. And so, job hopping within an industry, that I think makes sense. And I think that that's also common, right? So I don't think, the idea that like I'm an IBM lifer, then I don't know if anybody in our generation really aspires to that. What's your perspective on?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so either. I think most reasonable people who are kind of reasonably aware are not thinking that, right? But they're thinking maybe one industry for life. But even let's just say that, right? So let's just say you pick, I mean, if you want to be working in the software industry for your life or something, right? Just for the sake of argument, then like, the pace of change even within one industry is way bigger and faster, and there's more people coming in who are, there are always new people coming in. There's people from other countries who are competing with you now. These companies are global, and like I feel like with each career jump or with each adjustment, it does become more challenging to keep up with technology, with these things. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I this is just one really specific example, but I do kind of buy this fact that, the stability thing is maybe perhaps more of an illusion now than it was before, even within an industry, right? So even within an industry, the entire software industry can get disrupted, and then these skills might not transfer super well. I mean, they might transfer somewhat well, but then whatever next industry is gonna be big, the people who specialize in that are gonna have an upper hand over you and such. So
yeah. I mean, that much makes sense. Let me ask you a question, Phil. Like, let's say we had a friend who was in their mid-20s, like went to pharmacy school and works as a pharmacist, right? Like, there's some potential for that job to get disrupted, right? Like AI could disrupt basically any job. But it seems, I don't know what I would tell that person in terms of preparing for that possibility. Would you have any concrete advice there?
just tell them to learn to code. That's like the buzzword for everyone. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's a good, very concrete example, right? So like pharmacy is a great example, or like nursing or something, right? Something in the healthcare profession that's generally thought of as more stable, like, oh, we always will need medical services and medicine and whatever. Yeah, I mean, I'm not telling them, go to Hacker News and look up how to quit your job right now, or like start your own pharmacy, whatever. Right? I wouldn't say that, but I guess, I think that what I got out of the article wasn't like a specifics about a job. It was like if you feel a certain way, right? So, for example, like pharmacy example, if you've been, from a young age, let's say you've always wanted to like be an artist or something, right? Like you've always wanted to be very creative in your craft or art or whatever, but then your family came up, maybe weren't that well off, and then your parents are immigrants or something, and then your culture is kind of saying pharmacy school is a good choice because it's not super hard, right? It's not too expensive. It's not like you have to be a neurosurgeon or something like that's really crazy, right? You can't, you don't need to get to Harvard Medical School to be a top neurosurgeon. Do decently in school, get into a decent, college, do get decent grades, get your way into pharmacy school, make sure everything is fine. And we know people in this profession that it seems like it's a reasonable path, right? And it'll be good, and you'll have time for your family and to provide and everything. And then you're like, okay, that sounds good. And you study hard in school, and maybe school doesn't come that easily to you, right? Like maybe you're like not super into school, and you're really into like art or craft or whatever, right? And then you're like doing this, and then it's kind of a grind. You didn't really like school, you didn't really like college, you didn't really like pharmacy school, but you're like, okay, like you got a job as a pharmacist, I'm working in it for a while. I'm not saying everyone's like this. I'm saying like if you were like that, and then you've been a pharmacist for like a few years, right? Like 5 years or whatever, and you're just like, yeah, I'm not really feeling doing this job for my whole life. I mean, I'm not afraid of being laid off or fired, right? Like, not afraid of being fired, but I don't really feel like doing this forever. Like, is it just me feeling spoiled or entitled, or like, how can I resolve this kind of weird feeling?
Yeah.
Right? For that person, reading this thing, thinking about it, might help them resolve one or another. Maybe the resolution is that they stay in pharmacy, but they have a different outlook on it. And they say like, this is just how I can be happy in this way, and I've resolved that my responsibility to my family or my culture, my values outweigh some kind of a desire to be an artist or whatever. Or the person may come to the conclusion, maybe I have the means, I've saved up some money. Maybe I can take some time off and explore something else, or maybe I can work part-time as a pharmacist and not make as much money and work part-time in my art or whatever. So yeah, I think it's sort of an orthogonal point we're getting to earlier about I'm afraid of job security. Like, even if you do have perfect job security, theoretically, as a pharmacist or a nurse or something, do you really want to be in that job? Maybe that's more the question. Like, do you really want to stay in that job?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because like I think it's tough for people to like if you're, I mean, in software engineering, this question pops up a lot too, right? Like the job is okay, but I'm not fully engaged in my job, but it pays the bills. Like, what do I do? And I get the point that, okay, by asking these questions, then, it goes from like a haze of like vague dissatisfaction to, okay, like I'm consciously making this trade-off and then I'm going to proceed. Like that much makes sense to me, but I get the feeling in the article that he's arguing that a larger percentage like seriously consider, more concrete steps in alternate directions. And which is fine, but it's just it's a large jump to make from, oh, I'm interested in this thing to I'm doing well enough to where I can kind of move away from what was previously my full-time job. I mean, it appears to me that, if the goal is within a few years, you're going to try to make six figures off of this side gig. My feeling is that the probability of that succeeding is relatively low, but I don't know. That's just my thought. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I think the readership is probably more inclined to have, these sorts of thoughts. I mean, yeah, I think it's, the target audience are these sorts of people, maybe they're younger people who may have a lot of different interests, right? May have a lot of kind of maybe very intellectually restless or curious, and may not want, maybe more, non-conformists and say, oh, maybe I don't want this comfortable 9-to-5 job sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to take the whole article to its extremes either, right? That it's a it's a kind of a probe into one extreme side of thinking about, and I don't think it's fully coherent either. And it's not like it's a formula ABC. It's just, I feel, is a bunch of disparate thoughts that you can kind of pick pieces from in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of my interpretation of the article is colored by the fact that the author had this very, off the main road path where he has this blog that has millions of viewers and can sustain like his full-time interest. And like, I mean, that's great if you're excited about going for a path like that. But like my general feeling is that like basically people for whom that path is appropriate, like they should have an urge to do it, even if like everyone else in their circle is telling them not to do it. Like it's not really, in my view, a path that you want to push people on, because like the risk of failure is so big, and the median outcome, in my opinion, is negative, I would say. Right? Like the mean is positive, right? Because you put Zuckerberg, you put Google in there, but like the median, I guess it depends on how you measure it, but financially, I would make a bet that the median outcome in pursuing these side interests is negative.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe that's just because he talks a lot about these I mean, a good part of the article is talking about non-traditional paths, right? Or non-traditional paths. But I guess if you take that out of, I guess I didn't really see that too much in the article. But like, if you take the non-traditional path part, then it seems like it's still a decent way to evaluate your career, even in a traditional path, right? So maybe like you're at a big company like Google and you're thinking, should I stay in the engineering track, or should I try to become a manager, or should I try to switch to like a product oriented group versus a internal tools oriented group, or like, do I really want to be going to, sales meetings with external customers because I don't feel like talking to customers? Or like, do I really want to stretch myself this way because I feel it's valuable? Or should I work on something that's a non-profit project within the company, or something that's like more business oriented, even though like I may be more into that part? So I feel like even if you're just going to stay at one company, maybe the framing could still, could still be useful somehow.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. So like in any career path, there's typically some decision making that you have to do in terms of navigating your career. And so you want to think about what the possibilities are, and you don't want to ignore certain possibilities if they're in fact more realistic than you may have assumed on first glance. I think that all that I agree with. I think part of what set it up was one of the illustrations at the beginning, where it's like you're a baby and then you go through school and then you kind of have this windy road in your career, then you go to retirement, right? And like one of the points he made was that ages 0 through 20, say, most people don't think that hard about what they want to do. They somehow or another, they pick a major, they go to college, and then, once you graduate with your major, then there are a few kind of default options you select from, and then you're on a track, and then you just keep on going. And I guess if it sounded to me that he was disapproving of, he didn't really approve of people kind of blindly picking a path, but maybe I was reading too much into that.
Yeah, it's I mean, and I guess like from the flip side, it's like, having picked a more traditional path, maybe there's, value in self-reflecting and thinking like, did I just pick that because I'm going on the stream? Or like, are there more fundamental reasons why I feel like this is truly a good thing? Or is just rationalization? Or, do I even need to think so hard about it? Right. So for the 99% of the people who are on a more traditional path, maybe it's still valuable to reflect on that, even if you're not going to change your actions day to day.
Yeah. Hey, Phil, I'm curious, how'd you pick your major?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the reason why I don't know if I resonate a lot with this article was that like I feel like I've just kind of defaulted into everything pretty much.
Oh,
But yet I feel like I had always had a guiding hunch behind things, and I always was very self-reflective. But it would seem from the outside that everything kind of went through very straight, right? So like, yeah, who were unsure about majors, or even had been picked a major, unsure about what their real passions or strengths were and everything. And all throughout college, even like I was just like, yeah, I like the computer stuff. It seems cool. I just do it. Like it seems like a lot of people are majoring in it. It seems pretty mainstream here at MIT, especially back then. I mean, now also, I mean, a lot of people major in computer science, right? I mean, in a lot of schools, it's a big major, so it's not a surprise. But like, yeah, it was never like a point of, yeah, I mean, I liked computer stuff growing up, right? I mean, I never had like a giant interest in like building mechanical objects or toys or whatever, or like doing stuff with like materials or things. So I'm like, okay, sounds good. And then, yeah, then just things just went along from there, I guess. I don't have a great story, right? I don't have a great, diagram or anything.
Hey, Phil, I'm also curious. If when you were applying to be an assistant professor, if that didn't go through the first time, would you have tried a second year?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I don't think so. Yeah, so the backstory there was I was at Google. So, when I was graduating from grad school, I didn't think about the professor route. Like I never thought about that route just because yeah, I mean many reasons. And also like it didn't help that most of the time we were in grad school was like an economic downturn, and like universities just really weren't hiring that much. So like there wasn't a buzz about lots of faculty positions opening up while we were in school anyway. But even for the people who were like gung ho, I really want to do this, it was like, people were getting shot down left and right anyway. So I think we both dodged that bullet very inadvertently, just due to our own negligence, I guess. But yeah, we both dodged that bullet, I guess. And so then, yeah, so the first time, yeah, if I didn't get anything, yeah, I don't think I would have tried again. Yeah, I don't think so. I would have done I would have probably still stayed in the Bay Area and done something else in industry. Yeah. I don't think I would have. Again, this is why this whole story that I have so far career wise has very much been locally optimizing. I very much connect with the Steve Jobs connecting the dots thing, right? I very much just like I'll take the next thing moving forward, kind of survey around and do the best I can there. And when you look backwards, the dots do connect. So yeah, so the long answer to the question was, if I applied when I was at Google, that first time, if I didn't get any offers, yeah, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done it again.
I mean,
it wasn't like I was any better position to the next year, right? Like I wasn't really active in research or anything. So it wasn't like a year later I would be very much better position anyways, right? It would be kind of random again.
Yeah. Yeah. Part of what resonated with me was that when you try to pick a path, right? Like, for example, you moving into academia, there's a mental model of like, what's my probability of succeeding, right? And, you know, it's for certain decisions, it's really tough to have an accurate sense as to what the probability of success is. Like in my example, right? Like when I'm trying to start a company and my goal is basically within a few years get to 6 figures revenue, right? And it's like, what percentage would I peg on that? Like for someone with zero business experience, I don't know. I just pull a number out of a hat, but at some point you got to make a decision, and it's just like gut, I guess, and then you pick something. But the author, he talks about persistence and how certain paths, like I think he has this argument that there are certain goals out there that people can reach if they're willing to persist long enough. But I don't know, like I personally subscribe to that, but I don't. I wouldn't. I would hesitate to tell someone else that because, you know, if you persist in a path and you fail, like the consequences could be like almost arbitrarily big,
Yeah,
right? Like,
I totally, yeah, I resonate with that too. Like, I see that there are, yeah, I mean, this is the whole like, if you're in a multi-dimensional space, if you're off on the wrong direction, the more you persist, the more wrong you're getting, right?
yeah,
Like if you're totally wrong-headed about a certain thing and you're stubborn about it, the more persistent you're, the worse you are, because the farther away you get from the right answer.
yeah,
And yeah, I totally resonate with that as well. So that's sort of I mean, it's not a great analogy, but actually it is. Like that's also why, like, your question of if I didn't get the faculty position the first one, I wouldn't have tried it because I was pretty strong in my head that I didn't want to be like an eternal postdoc person,
Mm-mm.
right? I was pretty adamant in my head that like I felt like, yeah, I mean, computer science is not that bad because it's still a fairly young field, but like there are like, I mean, if you're in like the more traditional physical or life sciences, like,
Yeah.
I mean, there are, many, many, many people are essentially postdocing for life in a way, right? Like you're a postdoc and then you try to build up publications and it's like a real grind, and you try to apply for things, you try to apply for grants, and then you kind of become a more senior kind of project scientist sort of person, and you're in these labs and you're on grants, you're maybe running projects and stuff, but like these tenure track positions are so rare. And the longer you go, right, I mean, you're at it for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, it's not like you have a better, I mean, again, it's not my field, but my personal feeling is that if you're at it for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, it's not like that persistence gets you a better chance, because every year they're going to be fresh graduates and
Mm-hmm.
fresh postdocs that have, the latest breakthroughs and stuff. It's like every year you persist, the pool of people who compete just keeps on. It's like the hordes keep on coming, right?
Yeah.
And like you're just getting, your clock is ticking down. And yeah, so that's a great. I was pretty clear in my head that I didn't want to do that. Like I was like, I will do this time, but I'm not gonna like take a postdoc and like grind it out and stuff and try to publish papers with the hope of applying for faculty positions later. Now, I think that in computer science, it wouldn't be as hard. Like I've seen a fairly good amount of success cases out of this, but I still I wasn't feeling that enough to do that. So I would not have persisted in that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary prospect, right? Like if you were to persist for say 7 years and then you finally give up, right? It's just like, okay, shoot. I mean, you're not gonna die, right? Like you're gonna get a job, but like I don't know if you ever fully recover
Yeah, you
from.
just feel so burned out and so jaded, right? Yeah, yeah. It's like, yeah, you'll get a job in doing data science, doing software engineering, doing something, right? If you're in a STEM field, you have skills, you can program, you can, do stuff. But like, yeah, you start your career off and like the other people around you at most are like fresh out of their PhD, right? Like they're, 7 years younger than you. And then you're like, yeah, I mean, it's fine. You're not going to starve, but how motivated are you going to be? Right? How's your morale going to be? Yeah. So I definitely see that there is a cost to getting worn down in that way. So it's hard. I mean, I think it's really hard. So I think that pretty early on, even when I was at Google thinking about going back to academia, I did not want to. I saw that path and I was like, I don't want that to even be a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, like I think prior to trying to start a company, I would have been more gung ho, like, oh, I want to try this. Like, oh yeah, go for it. I mean, like these days I'm kind of more hands off or like neutral, right? Just like, all right, you do what you want to do. I'm not going to encourage or discourage, but because, you know, the by being on the, if you're below a certain level of success, like it's painful, you know, like there's a real cost to trying to do it and not getting there. I mean, you learn sometimes, but like it's, to me, the cost is non-trivial.
Muted. How's it now?
Yeah, it's good now.
That's weird. I don't know what the heck happened to Spike. This mic in this laptop is crazy. All right, let me try this one more time. Man, technical difficulties, man. Okay.
Well, ATR. Okay, how's this now?
Good, good.
Okay. So yeah, I think there was this glamorization of failure too, right? That like, you know, kind of fortune cookie advice is like, oh, you know, just go for it. And if you fail, then you'll learn something from the failure. And, you know, it's okay. Just fail, get back up, persist. You know, all these successful actors or musicians got rejected, you know, writers got rejected 30 times on auditions and pitching their book. Just keep doing it. Just keep getting back up and doing it. But I think that is, you know, that does gloss over this factor that, like, several things you mentioned. One is that there's often unproductive failures, right? There's often very unproductive failures that you don't learn a lot from. And moreover, if you fail in an unproductive way and you don't have a right mental framework or support network, like you just get more jaded, right? You just get more and more jaded. And then I think that's how people become like really bitter about certain things, right? That like, you know, I mean, here's a made up example, right? So like if I'm like, you know, if I have it in me, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna like, you know, try to make it an MBA or whatever. I think we always use this analogy, right? I'm like, I'm really trying to make an MBA. I'm gonna like go work really hard, like do all my things, and like I don't have a coach or anything, right? Like I don't have anything, right? Just to go to the court, I'm gonna practice and stuff, and I'm gonna go to like some auditions or tryouts, and like I never get anywhere. They even let me in the door, and then I'm like, oh man, I'm just gonna go to some other tryouts in another city. Like I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just gonna go for it, try out another city. Oh man, I got rejected again. And then after a while, I get like so bitter. I'm like, oh man, the basketball industry is just rigged against me, right? It's like they're just trying to keep me down. I try all these things, it doesn't work. And I think that, sad to say, but I think there's a lot of people in many fields. I mean, I'm sure in entrepreneurship and also in academic fields that are trying really hard, right? They generally work really hard, but they don't have the right mechanisms or the right support or the right training or the right, whatever, or, and there's luck involved as well. And like they fail a lot in an unproductive way, and then they get really bitter and then they blame others and stuff. And that's, yeah, it's a very hard cycle. So I totally, this is not super relevant, but like I very much am careful about working with my students to try to ensure that they're on the winning side, right? As much as I can, right? Like, kind of knock on wood that we've had fairly good success with paper acceptances so far. I mean, it's not 100%, but like, I don't want to let them alone, to fail in a very bad way, because that's just so demoralizing and without the right context and everything. Yeah, I mean, it's like the equivalent of what I did early in grad school, just submitting papers to random things and just totally failing. And like, yeah, on one hand, I learned something. On the other hand, I don't think those first few years of learnings were that useful, right? Because I was just so far off base. Like, it was just like, us submitting to theory conferences or something, right?
Yeah, well, one point I want to bring up is that with this analogy of the tunnels, I think this is my current feeling, is that you don't want to try to be too creative and kind of creating your own tunnel. Like ideally, you want to look at existing work, kind of learn from examples, and take a step in a logical direction that I mean, it's maybe you don't get the crazy successes if you follow this, but like I'm just recently a much bigger fan of leveraging existing knowledge, kind of learning what's been done in the field already. And, there's this opposite feeling that, oh, the outsider kind of comes up with these insights that the people in the field don't. But like, I don't know. I think if you think in a vacuum, there are just so many ways to fail, because the idea space is multidimensional. It's just so easy to get lost. Like, it really helps to have some constraints, and like knowledge of the field kind of helps you channel your energy in a.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is very true in research and in entrepreneurship, right? I think they're both very open-ended things where there's not a right answer. There's a lot of multi-dimensional factors involved. Yeah, it's absolutely right that it is. I've been talking with a bunch of people about this sort of independent research and kind of people doing this outside of the mainstream and such. And I've been having interesting conversations with people about that. But like, I'm always the face of the institution and the man, so I'm always like, there is value in mainstream institutions if you understand them properly and take them at face value and see that they're not perfect. But like, I have this whole spiel about this, is that like in this ideal world where you have a loose network of people who are developing interesting ideas, building off of each other people's ideas, talking about them, discussing them, shaping things, validating things, it could be this world where you're in the Renaissance and you're in the salons all talking to each other and having beer and whatever and developing mathematics or calculus or whatever. But like in the modern world at scale, that kind of does look like the academic system, right? If you squint hard enough, you need funding for this. You need people to fund it. You need institutions to support it. You need ways to teach this knowledge. You need ways to publish and communicate and review this knowledge. Like, it's like if you try to put together all these things from first principles, it would kind of look like our current academic institutions. And granted, it's not perfect. I mean, they're kind of evolved, but like, this sort of, very Silicon Valley disruptive things. Oh, this, whole academic or research or scientific institution is broken. Let's just scrap it and like create a new thing off the coast of California where we're all like, international waters, just dreaming again. Like, yeah, I think I totally, and same thing with business, probably, right?
Yeah. I think with the academia, if the mainstream research community doesn't value your work, then the one alternative I could think of is try to validate it in the capitalistic way, right? Like can you turn it into a business? If so, then there's a clear demonstration of value. And like my experience in grad school, I fell in this trap of like things that were not valued in the research community. Like I don't know, I just had this fetish about ideas that were not valued in the research community and didn't like directly lead to, a business success, right? And
wow,
like
that's amazing.
I don't know why, I mean, I think it's a common like IPython, right? Like or there's a bunch of like sage math. I think there are several examples of like these large scale relative to academia, large scale software projects that they try to sell as like a research contribution, but it's more like a tool, and it's like this weird middle spot where it's like you can argue that it's providing economic value, but they're not capturing it, and so it's in this like no man's land. Unless you're okay with that, right? Like if you're okay with just creating this really popular software package that's free and you don't make any money off of it, that's one thing. But like, I think some people who aspire to create these types of software packages, you could become bitter in that you're not a superstar in academia and you're not a billionaire either, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is where this intersects with the open source software world, right? That's right. That open source software, the world of open source software, is filled with a lot of hard work that is unrecognized, right? By both academia and by the market, right? That do not directly capture the value, and that finding ways to sustain open source software, whether by corporate sponsorship or by making a company out of it and doing stuff with it, yeah, it's a challenge. I think it is a challenge, and that's another speaking of which, that's another kind of path that I explicitly very much avoided, that I saw that I didn't want to go down that path. Even though there were some appeals to that, I saw that that seemed like a hard life, and I wouldn't, I wouldn't be okay with that hard life. Yeah, and that's another, speaking of the academia thing and the open source, I thought very much about that. I'm like, all right, this seems like a pretty hard life. The biggest successes in the IPython now is Project Jupyter world is that that's gotten a fair amount of mainstream success because of data science and machine learning now coming up, and so like the project itself has a lot of social value, but in terms of capturing it, I mean, we talk really concretely about this. This is actually really interesting. I'm trying to think. I would say that the person who has captured the most value out of it, which is Fernando Perez, who started IPython, right? Which deservedly so, because he's kind of the founder in a way, right? So he was in one of these infinite research staff sort of positions in academia, right? Where you're on some grants and you're doing open source and stuff, and built it up. So last year, I think it was last year, he managed to transition into a tenure track faculty position at UC Berkeley. And he is basically the only example of someone in that world who has been able to make that jump. And you have to be that, you have to be the founder of the most popular project that's used by millions of people. They won the ACM Software Systems Award last year. So they won the highest ACM award for software, right? Which is, a really big honor. And given all that value captured is one person being elevated to that position. And, and I think it's fine because other people on the core team, some of them work at companies like Bloomberg. They work at I don't know exactly what company, but they work at good companies and they're able to work on open source as part of their job. So they're fine. They're not. No one is starving. Everyone is fine. And Brian Granger, who was one of the other elites, he was already a professor at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So he was already a professor. He already had tenure. I think he didn't have tenure when it started, but he was already a professor there. So, both founders are now in tenured sort of positions in academia. Yeah, but open source is a hard thing to capture value from. And that's for some people, it's kind of a mission they really want to do. So they're willing to put up with the difficulties of that. But I was like, all right, I think it's an interesting life, but it's way too hard for me to want to do this.
Yeah. I mean, just selfishly, it's a long slog, and the project, when it gets traction, you have this intuition that you're delivering value, but the tough part is you don't capture it, and then I didn't know this about the IPython. That's great, that you finally get the validation in the academic community, but it's a long road.
It is a very long road, and it's and oftentimes it's interesting because the people who end up capturing a lot of that, I mean, if we're talking about capturing value, are academics who are not yourselves. They're the ones who are able to build off of it for their research projects and for their things and get grants off of it and get recognition off of it and use your software, which you develop for free and is open. And they're the ones getting kind of capturing more value, but which is kind of the point in a way, right? If you make something open source, you make an operating system or a platform open source, the point is that a lot of people use it to get, so societally, if we count the total value captured by a project like this, it's very good.
Yeah.
It's the motivations of people who are actually doing it it's tough to capture that. And, and I think that, part of the solution is, better corporate sponsorship, right? So if companies like Google or Microsoft or things are investing in open source, then that encourages a more stable ecosystem. Microsoft just bought GitHub, and these sorts of ecosystems could be more stable, but it is difficult. I think this open source software development roles are extremely, extremely difficult to directly capture the value of. And I think that, speaking of the whole academia, there is sort of this dream among some academics of I want it all, right? It's I want the research cred, and then I want the good for the world cred, the open source software cred, and then I want the actually make money cred. And I think each one of those is so hard to do, right? It's so hard to be recognized as a supreme researcher. It's so hard to be making a piece of open source software that people love, and it's so hard to actually make any kind of a business succeed. I think the people who want to just this dream of like, we're going to make this open source thing that's going to revolutionize research, and it's going to be made into a company that makes a lot of money, and we're going to have all our stuff be open source, and it's going to be beautiful. And it just seems like really hard. Any one of those three is really hard.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few success stories, right? Like Qualcomm, or like more recently from MIT, the Databricks, the Apache Spark. Like, like I think it's still,
yeah, like the systems folks have that dream, right? Like these large scale systems databases, database companies, and via like systems platforms and stuff. Yeah, there are dreams. Yeah.
yeah, or like Jeff Dean, right? Like he has academic cred. But yeah, it's a small set of people who have done it.
Man, you're just crushing everybody's dreams tonight.
No.
You're just crushing everyone's dreams.
No, I just, when I first read it, I was just thinking, who does this apply to? Like, like is everyone supposed to be a dreamer? Like that was on my first reading, that was my reaction. And
so it seems like you're an ex-dreamer, because I thought when you were going to read it, I thought you'd really feel it because it would resonate with kind of your past self and your dreamer self. But you're like an anti-dreamer now, it seems. You've been hardened.
I think I'm more, I don't know. Yeah. But before, I'm like, similar to this, academia doesn't support open source, like I was very anti like status quo. And like, I think I don't know, gotten older or gained an appreciation for status quo. I'm not sure which, but like, I think I'm less of a rebel and more of a, if you talk to someone and they think you're like way off, then, I think the first instinct should be to revisit what you just said. And like, you could still be right, but like, don't blow it off just because they disagree with you,
Yeah, man, I think we're getting old. That's like the true mark of getting old. Right? We crossed the hill. Yeah, we totally crossed. And like, this is something I grapple with, right? That like, this is kind of going back to the beginning of like, I felt like I've always, I guess career-wise at least, done very establishment, very, mainstream sorts of things. And I, maybe part of why this article resonates with me is that it forces me to think from first principles, or as much as possible, like, I made these very mainstream choices. Do I have a really solid grounding for that, or is it just because it seemed like the easiest thing at the time? And if it didn't seem like easy, if it was because the easiest thing at the time, is that a bad thing? Right? Maybe it isn't. Maybe like the his tentacles model, maybe the life comfort and the safety and comfort part of me, that is what I value, right? So like, that's perfectly legitimate if that's my priority versus being a rebel or being, more other things. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess part of what influenced me was that when I initially tried to start a business, I kind of had certain plans, right? And like, let's say it's made up of 4 components, and like when I talk to people, like all 4 components are rejected, right? Because of, conventional wisdom, blah, blah, blah. And then like at some point, like I switch each of them like to what most people were saying, like not everything, but like there were certain like, stuff related to business model or stuff related to, who's your target audience. Like I had a more idealistic view at first, but then once I switched it over, then things started to work. And so like, I guess that experience really, gave me a greater appreciation for, when you're talking with others, like maybe they have a point, like that's kind of where I'm at
we
right
are
now.
getting old. Yeah. And like, I mean, and from a mentorship perspective, that's another thing I start grappling with also, that now I am getting older and being in more of a mentor position, because I am like speaking as the face of the man, right? Like, for example, I mean, the really concrete example is that we've been going through is, if you're writing research papers or formulating research projects with students, it's like, I have the heuristics behind me of, dozens and dozens and dozens of examples before. I've reviewed hundreds of papers, I've written dozens of paper submissions and stuff. And like, I have heuristics. I made a video about this so you can see. I mean, it'll come out soon. Like, I have heuristics and I can try to explain them, but like, I know that I sound just like the man, right? I sound like, yeah, this is just the way things are done right now, right? Like, I don't have a better answer than like, this is just how papers are structured right now. So if 99 papers are structured this way and yours is structured completely backwards like a rebel, it's not like people are gonna love it because you're rebel, right?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Yeah. Like the benefit you get from violating this convention doesn't really, yeah, it's not worth it, sounds like.
Yeah, and there's kind of a way of like, conventions. I mean, I'm sure it's the case in the business thing too. Like, you know, you want to not be creative in the ways that people don't expect, right? So it's like if people are, I mean, I'm just making examples, like people are expecting, a landing page and like a pricing model where it's like very simple. It's like bam, 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 click, 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 or whatever. And you're like, no, I'm gonna like do something completely different. Then like people just customers or whatever just don't expect it. It's just weird, right? It just makes you
Yeah.
feel like an oddball. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess earlier in my life, I had a greater desire to feel creative, but now I'm just more like, okay, what's the right answer, right? Like it could be in the back of the book, but like like it, you don't get extra points for being creative, right? The goal is to be right, you know.
I just spit all over my laptop. Yeah. It's like we're doing the math homework. You just don't get extra points for doodling.
I don't know, maybe I sound jaded, but like I think just this urge to feel creative, I think that like it's something that could lead you astray.
Yeah, I think so. We're talking very conservative, stodgy old people. Totally. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think part of that is, one positive way to frame it is that it's like, there is a schema that people expect from a certain thing, right? Things are structured a certain way, whatever you do. And unless there's, like you're saying, like, unless there's a great reason to break from that schema, the schema is nice because it sets people's expectation, right? People expect to see this, this, and this. And you can be creative within it, right? And you can be original within it. You can have a good message, a good whatever, but like, I'm just, talking out on my butt because I don't know anything. But like, imagine like a product landing page. People are expecting, a screenshot with a short slogan, and then you scroll down a little bit and there's some pricing or whatever, right? And if everyone expect that in your genre, right? If you're in an industry, if you're in education, if you're in, cloud services or whatever, if there are 10 cloud services companies and they all have similar landing pages and a structure, then like if yours just looks like it was done by like an 8th grader just because you want to be creative, like it's not going to seem very professional to like, whoever the CTO is checking out all the different companies, they pull up yours, like, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, I think just, yeah, being creative is good, but don't try too hard to be creative, like it should, if you're, I think if you're creative, then you should naturally, like you just naturally think about the problem in a different way, right? Like you're not forcing it, you're not trying to earn style points, like, I don't know. I guess it's kind of tough to describe without concrete examples, but like, I know this is something that I struggled with earlier.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I mean, we can end on that. It's like that. Oftentimes an interesting thing is it's the solution or the approach is creative because you come at it because of yourself, right? Because of your own experiences and your own personality, or your own training, right? It's like I have this interdisciplinary training in X and I apply it to Y, and I don't have to try to be all frills and stuff. And it reminds me, this is a different topic for another day, but it reminds me of like, high school students who grew up in, suburban San Diego or whatever. So one of the things I've been doing lately is just like, because I work at Starbucks all the time, is that like, it's like college application season, right?
Yeah.
So you have all these like kids meeting with like college counselor tutors or, in kind of rich suburban neighborhoods, right? Like, there are these people who kind of counsel kids on, how to apply to college. And I've been watching like YouTube videos about this also, like, like what to do to apply for college, how to craft your essay and stuff. And like, I think one inherent issue is that like, if you're all from like the same, middle class, upper middle class suburban high school in California, like your life experiences are not that different, right? You all kind of grew up, you like took the bus to school, you drove to school, you played some sports, you went to class, like you're not that differentiated. So like in order to make these college essays, you have to try to do all these gimmicks to be creative and like really try to spice it up. But then like that just seems so hard to do because like it's like the equivalent of making different homepages, right? You're all coming from the same background, so like, how do you spice things up, right?
Yeah, I mean, in that specific situation, I would argue that it makes sense to try to be like that's one example where it seems like, I mean, you don't want to force it, but like you do have to differentiate yourself in some way, right?
Yeah.
Like, And it's I agree. It's
It's a grind, right? It's like such a grind because it's like, yeah, everyone has to do it, but everyone knows it's such a grind because like your lived experiences for the most part. I mean, there are obviously some students who grow up in very different areas, and that's great. But like, the mainstream clump of people who are applying to certain school is going to fall in this giant clump of like undifferentiated mass, right?
Yeah. I took 5 AP classes and I played a varsity sport. Like, okay, that's everybody, It's just like, all right, well, I don't know.
Yeah, and then like the coaches or the counselors are saying like, okay, you shouldn't talk about those 5 AP class sports because everyone has that. So like, pick something weird, right? Like, think about a trip you took and like think about your grandma or whatever. Like, just think of something really weird because you just have to do something that's different because otherwise, if you just write about what comes to mind, it's the same AP classes and clubs that everyone else has.
Phil, I mean, you actually had a different story, but yeah, for me, born in SoCal and just like born and raised, it was wow. This hits really close to home, man.
It was such a grind. Yeah, but that's another episode. But I'll give you the final word on this one then.
I mean, I think it's. I think. I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to bust people's dreams. If you want to do it, go for it. But like, it was a thought-provoking article. If you haven't read it yet, I think it's worth a read.
That's your official review. This is not a sponsored post. All right, we'll end it there. It's not a sponsored post. I like it.